Just a whole lot of brawling, and I cannot wait.
Yeah, I expect a lot of brawling, a lot of hyper carry style compositions, especially for that in the side of Freedom. And, you know, I brought it up yesterday. I want to bring it up again. The thing for me that I'm mainly looking at with Freedom is, again, the positive change is still continuing through their performance, even against a team as respectable as Gale Force eSports. But what does Cure look like when he's against a team that is more likely to be able to get that punishment? Because he did feel like he stands out in every team fight where Team Freedom's really winning. You're like, man, Cure just bodied that fight and really enabled them to kind of take off. But suddenly against a Gale Force eSports, does that mean, you know, it's more of an overextension and they get the punishment, blow up Cure, and just go, what now, Freedom?
And on the topic of Cure, my question is, how scared of the team fighting of Team Freedom is Gale Force specifically? Do they feel like they have to adjust their playstyle to more of a macro, lots of global play because they are so respectful of the team fights of Team Freedom, or maybe even adjust their drafting to not allow some of those heroes? So we know what we are looking forward to in this series. Let's hear what the players are looking forward to in this series.
Gale Force definitely has a lot more experience than we do, and that could be a deciding factor, but they're getting used to 2 new players, whereas we're only getting used to 1, and we're both coming off of good wins. I guess it just depends to me of how they do against No Tomorrow. Versus Gale Force, we mainly know what maps are going to be played, so for now we're just watching and seeing how they play versus No Tomorrow, and then exploiting possible weaknesses that GFE shows in that series.
The new roster for Team Freedom is definitely an upgrade from the previous season. I do think Cure is one of the most promising new players out there for sure. I do think that I know Cure better than most people though. I know his hero pool pretty well. I feel like I understand which heroes he's best at. So we might be looking to kind of keep him away from a few of those heroes, and Team Freedom is actually potentially a top team in North America. Right now, it's really hard to say where the teams line up. Any of them could be any other team, depending on whether they have a good day or a bad day, a good draft or bad draft. So not gonna underestimate Freedom at all. Other than that, probably just play our game and try to win it that way.
It's interesting to hear so many teams talk about how it's hard to tell where all of the teams lie, where their true skill level is, who is better than whom at the end of the day, because it's way more dependent on how that team is performing and feeling that day. We heard that from Goku yesterday, even from Roll20, and now from Fan and Gale Force eSports.
I feel like the biggest indicator of that is a lack of consistency. When it comes to performance, when you don't have a very reliable performance out of one team over and over and over again, you suddenly cannot gauge the strength level of them. Granted, you know, these guys have other variables to consider, like for instance in scrimming, you can win against a team all day, but if they're just sandbagging you, not showing anything, and intentionally trying to make you feel like you're the better team, it can give false positives. But overall, I feel like a lot of that comes down to just flat out consistency in NA.
Well, we know where the strength of Freedom lies. That is their team fighting. Let's see where they'll be brawling versus Gale Force eSports in game number 1. I don't think that was Fnatic's choice, but we are going to Sky Temple. I'm going to guess that that was Team Freedom's Battleground pick. Team Freedom banning Battlefield of Eternity yet again. The Dragonshire ban is consistent along with Gale Force eSports, and yes, Freedom has picked Sky Temple.
Sky Temple, going to be a good map for them if they think that team fighting is truly their biggest strength. I know Freedom relies a lot onto that, so it's going to be nice to pick this map. I think it's a great start. I would just put it as like, I don't view it as a major direction outside of just team fighting, and if Freedom, again, thinks that's their #1, way to kick off the series and the best chances for you. Normally when we see teams do that, they go to like Cursed Hollow or something where you can still get out macroed, but it's a map on Sky that it is just, you have to be a better team fighting team than us, and they think they are going to be able to take out GFE?
Well, we know that that is Freedom's strength, but Gale Force eSports is by no means a bad team fighting team either. The synergy that they've been able to bring in right from the start of this new roster is very impressive, especially we talk about the backline synergy between Fan and K1 Pro. But we look at Gale Force and they make a lot of things, a lot of decisions, really good decisions. They do a lot of things right. Maybe not to the shot calling caliber yet of Equinox. There were times when No Tomorrow were able to out shot call them. But they're maybe like the baby bear where they have a little bit of everything and they're building everything up to be maybe the most consistent team, the team that has the most, is the closest to the top of North America.
I think that's a really good thing that you bring up there. I would agree. With Gale Force eSports right now, they don't have a major selling point, but they are the most well-rounded.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have an overly heavy selling point. It's not the, here's the macro play or here's the raw team fighting. And in the end, that usually means you are the better team. It's just whether or not you can remove that strength, which again, in this case, could be the team fighting of Team Freedom, lower it down to your level and rely on those other factors that you know you can perform better than them. We knew Genji was going to be a hot topic in this series. This is the first pick for Gale Force eSports, but the ban onto Li Ming, this is something that hasn't shown too frequently in North America.
No, but it makes a lot of sense versus Freedom because of the Genji and the Li Ming. There is an immediate target on Cure's back from how Team Freedom have drafted and from how they've played. So Gale Force is taking away those potential options. It is Sky Temple, so it is likely that we see Freedom go into Diva, which puts Cure more into a role like we've seen before whenever they pick Diva, which is playing things like Genji, Li Ming, and both of those now are off the table for Cure.
Yeah, it's really nice to see Gale Force try and force the hand, at least a little bit of a testing Freedom. And again, that comes down to what was my focus point here is we have seen him go to those things, like you said, even in Illidan has popped up here and there for Cure. But I want to see Gale Force suddenly force not just Cure. I feel like, you know, he's not enough on his own, but if you can make Cure slightly off comfort and then target somebody else, work into somebody else's hero pool is really where Gale Force could gain an upper hand just solely in a draft.
Stitches will be another focal point, like the Genji between these two teams. Zugrug was talking about on Friday how he is currently undefeated with the hero, and King Caffeine has been wrecking people with his hooks too. So expect that to be a highly prioritized pick throughout this series between the two teams. Dahaka is even another one too, and in taking Dahaka, that is Dahaka, Genji, and Li Ming now off. These are all big picks for Cure.
I'm excited. The Arthas ban here for Freedom, again, is only when talking about Cure's hero pool. It leads to an Illidan as like the first thought on the side of Freedom. So now this ban, I question Gale Force. It's pretty apparent they're targeting. And now Freedom is banning according towards that player once more. There's no way you're getting the Illidan outside of this. I feel like if you ban out this Arthas, it's just straight up admitting that. Even if you don't ban it, I question if you get the Illidan itself.
Then I think we'll see Freedom follow up that Uther with the Vala Ariel in the next two picks.
That's a good point. That would be the focus point for them to be able to move into that kind of double supporting style. It's just, I really was concerned that if Freedom locked in that Arthas ban, that it's essentially a waste, right? Because then you commit it into one direction, it would be easy for Gale Force to be able to respond with their secondary ban. But in the end, it's going to be targeting towards Muradin, not nearly as heavy of a tell in any direction.
Yeah, just slightly limiting the options for King Caffeine, but he has a lot of different routes he can go. Ariel ban over an Illidan ban here for Gale Force.
Freedom, are they going to end up picking up the Arthas or the Illidan for themselves? I do think we're going to see one of those two rotations, but I don't feel like that, at least first glance, stands out as a huge choice for them. Just, I'm taking that purely off of the hover rather than what they've shown into the past, what they were hovering, their mentality, and the targeting that Gale Force has put onto Cure. I would expect Freedom to not stick to their staple, like what they know, and suddenly realize we have to worry about this way more, right? So this is me suggesting that I assume Freedom is going to change, even though in the past they never have made that kind of a pick.
Nobody's ever really made them change too much yet, but we knew that this would be the series where it happened. Gale Force eSports has shown so much preparation against their opponents in the past. They are willing to make these kinds of drafts happen. Think about Infernal Shrines, even last phase versus Roll20, where they took away all of the comfort heroes at once from Roll20. Roll20 ended up winning that game, but they were behind a lot of it. Greymane Abathur.
They're going to stick a little bit more to what they know here, so not taking the risks that I was assuming they would, and sticking to an old school, more traditional composition. Sky Temple going with the Abathur here for Freedom. It's a map where we see more and more of them. You know, I am still not as sold on I think on maps like Cursed and Towers, I'm like, yeah, Abathur is the bee's knees, but suddenly on maps like Sky Temple, only because we know the map is easy to open up, we know the map's on a time schedule, and those are both things that Abathur doesn't want to deal with. It only puts more pressure onto the side of Freedom to make sure they're not only successful in the early stages of not falling behind, but their team fighting never fails.
Gale Force Esports has 2 picks left. We're waiting for King Caffeine's hero. Could be the Arthas. That was even a consideration for a ban from Team Freedom, as well as a Varian if he wants to play more of watching for somebody to dive in, if they feel like Team Freedom's going to add another diving hero alongside what they currently have in their composition. Brightwing for Akaface, and they'll end up with the Arthas.
They stick with the Arthas here. Composition for Gale Force Esports is, I mean, this is very what they play. You know, the new version of Gale Force, at least phase 2 Gale Force. This is sticking to the norm, especially having the high Tassadar and then getting themselves to have Akaface on a Brightwing. I like the composition here, but Freedom, they aren't too far off either. The Abathur is the only thing that is slightly adjusting for themselves. What do they want as the last pick?
Should be Kier's hero, unless we see him adjust to the Greymane. We've got Nasmus, who does play the Abathur when they draft him. Dansky has played all of the Greymane so far for the team, 4-1 with that hero. So one last pick. Is it a secondary warrior that we haven't seen from Kier before? Do they want to get their Illidan still? Up against Arthas, up against Brightwing, that's pretty scary.
It's going to be a Diva.
Okay, so they're going to shift things around once again. Probably Greymane then, played by Kier.
This is saying quite a bit about Team Freedom with their draft thought process.
Either Greymane or Abathur. It's a change in the heroes that they've drafted.
I'm going to guess that it's going to be the Greymane over the Abathur for Cure. That we see him there. Diva sticking to the norm for Team Freedom. They are probably the most Diva playing North American team that we have. They absolutely adore the hero.
Yeah, I actually think they are the most Diva playing team of any team
in the world.
In HGC.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was studying some of the Korean and Chinese drafts this morning, and now that I recall, I don't even know if I saw her name pop up.
Like, I know Tricked has played a fair amount of her, but I still think that Freedom has played more. I was talking with Deluxe earlier today.
Yeah. That's really cool. I mean, just the Diva performance that they made happen, and now it's kind of like, one of the coolest things about that is we felt like they've been untested. They still have the confidence to bust out the Diva versus Gale Force Esports in Game 1. And so now it's kind of just like, well, is that pick truly that good? And then part of the reason Freedom has stood out as a team, or in fact, is it one that, you know, suddenly, again, we see Gale Force going like, this is why nobody else has taken the Diva. It's really easy to punish.
Yeah, a lot of comfort picks on either side. Once again, Zugrug, Stitches, the Diva, Nasmus is currently 7-1 with her, but over on the other side, Gale Force has so many good, strong picks that they have. Their Arthas, the Genji 2, and Dahaka. So let's get into it. Game number 1 between Team Freedom and Gale Force Esports. We're going to Sky Temple.
Here in the blue, Team Freedom, the underdogs. We have Collusion playing the Uther. Zugrug is going to be on Stitches. Cure will be the Abathur. I got a lot to say about that, actually. Dansky will be the Greymane. And last year, we've got Nasmus on his Diva.
In the red, Gale Force Esports, with Dahaka, played by Michael Udall. Genji, of course, played by Fan. Up next, Arthas, played by King Caffeine. We'll have K1 Pro playing Tassadar, and Brightwing will be played by Akaface.
So with the Abathur factor, we often talk about when teams are pushed in hero pools, what are the heroes that are among the highest to kind of, you know, not really play that much, but be like, oh man, we really need this in a draft. What is the weakest player going to be on in this game? And seeing Cure over to the Abathur, I would say Abathur is actually, for a lot of teams, one of the higher ones, because he can never actually really mess up a game in most cases, right? He's never going to be out and get caught. You're playing another hero half the time. You're worried about your micro. And so that is something where some teams are willing to do that, much like the Tassadar. I'm not saying that Cure doesn't play Abathur, but it's a little bit of a development into the hero pool. I mean, the guy plays so much solo queue, he plays a little bit of everything, right? But can he play at this level? I question if this is Freedom going, Abathur is one of the best, most reliable, much like the Tassadar, or is this a actual Cure is our Abathur player?
Well, we'll have to see. Normally, it would be Nasmus who plays Abathur, but Nasmus is, without a doubt, the Diva player. And then Dansky is the only one really playing Greymane, too. So in this instance, it is to make sure that Nasmus and Dansky are both on their comfort heroes, the heroes that they can perform well against Gale Force Esports. So it does seem more so like it's to make sure that those two are on heroes that they play a lot more instead of trying to flex things out even more so, but we'll have to see how Cure does on that Abathur.
Yeah, I think it's more of a, you know, it's a very preference type situation that I don't think there is a clear right or a clear wrong, but it is something that makes me hesitate, you know, whenever I see a team doing that, especially knowing Gale Force committed 3 resources in the draft to target Cure, and suddenly we find him on something that is not a quote-unquote Cure hero. So going to be eyes on him, and also, again, it's going to be on Zugrug.
Yeah, talk about a hero, or player's hero. Zugrug's hero is Stitches, but a lot of that comes down to how the team plays along with that Stitches too. Collusion, in playing a lot of Uther, is always there for the follow-up, and Team Freedom is ready. Their brawling is basically second to none here at the beginning of Phase 1 for North America, and it's because of their ability to play together around heroes like Stitches for Team Freedom. There comes the hook, just barely doesn't connect on Fan. Team Freedom will take a hold of this middle temple.
But take a minute to appreciate the fact that that is Team Freedom almost solely getting like a lot of shots up on mid for no reason whatsoever. They have an Abathur composition, Gilly. These are the moments where you feel like the Tassadar, Genji, Arthas comp is going to apply pressure, deny shots. And in fact, Team Freedom found themselves nearly going 50-50 with Gale Force eSports. That is not overly devastating, but if this continues, I'm a little bit scared for Gale Force, especially, at least they were able to get that pick.
Yeah, that was a little devastating for Team Freedom to lose Dansky there. You saw the phase shift come in from Akaface, and Team Freedom has to always keep in mind the double global factor of Gale Force composition. This is a composition that Gale Force has been playing long before the current roster that they now have. Maybe not with the Genji, but with a double global, trying to get picks like that. And it's one that I wondered if we would see Gale Force try to play this type of composition to make sure that they have sort of the man-up advantage over the brawls and skirmishes that take place in this game because of the respect for Freedom's fighting.
And it should be noted that we're about, half a level away from the Mule variable coming online for the Abathur. Top 4 is prepped to just get almost maximum value, restore the HP back to that, and Gale Force is committing nothing on the top of the map. In fact, we see them invading onto the bottom lane. At this point in time, when you capture the first rotation of Giants, you have two options if you're the first team. It's pressure on top, pressure on bottom. Gale Force is volunteering to do it on bottom. I'm just questioning if that is going to end up biting them in the butt, again, because I assume this is a Mule on Abathur.
Right, it all comes down to how much they feel is enough to get done. They're starting at least on the towers. Team Freedom's going to scare them away. Hook lands, but Dimensional Shift. There's a lot of escape available for the members of Gale Force eSports. We've seen Burrows be able to stop. Nazmus is going to push Fan back in.
Collusion was able to get the stun right after the dash. I thought that might be enough to prep them up for this kill, but Fan, Genji's a pretty hard guy to kill. You see the Mule working away up there up on top. And over time, restoring the HP and some of the shots, making these altars that are spawning that much less valuable for Gale Force eSports. So what are they going to do now that we have our second Shrine phase? It looks like it's a Brightwing Dahaka side soak. Again, not winning the objective with an Abathur. They're volunteering to try and match his experience soak, which traditionally wouldn't be that bad of an idea, except for the fact that they aren't winning in structures. So Abathur's really going to be able to come online, and that skepticism I had towards the Abathur pick is suddenly no longer there.
Now, Team Freedom has a self-destruct if Nazmus wants to buy some time for this temple. So we're going to step back for now, waiting to see. They've got some globals, like Dahaka was hiding around in a bush, so want to make sure that they're not going to get caught unawares with these globals. They've already lost one pick to it. Gale Force eSports starting to get ahead in experience thanks to having both of the globals. Brightwing's going to phase shift in, and Dahaka.
There he is, Nazmus with the thrusters. Good Howling Blast coming out from King Caffeine, slowing him down. The explosion tug back in, and now Cap. He receives the mecha damage, but he's kiting his way out. He gets the last auto, and he actually lives, Gilly.
He does, and Dansky does not, with Fan following up the damage perfectly. They had the Carapace on top, but it just wasn't quite enough. The Symbiote was hoping that they could keep Dansky alive, but Freedom could not. They lose Dansky, and now Gale Force eSports, with a decisive action, bringing in their globals, are able to get the rest of this temple, a few shots off of it, and importantly, their heroic abilities.
But we have to realize that that also only just got merely a couple of shots out for Gale Force, and Gale Force needs full structures. They don't just need a little bit of damage. The Mule will be able to restore the HP there to the bottom lane as it did up on top. And still, Team Freedom is structurally close enough into this game, experience-wise too, for the Abathur to be a huge problem. That was a much-needed victory for Gale Force, but it's still not the game that they were hoping for with this type of play and the composition having the Genji versus the Abathur.
In Gale Force, we're willing to try to push with those heroic abilities, but Freedom were willing to fight them right back, knowing that they were under the safety of that fort. So they're able to defend at mid. Now heroics are available for Team Freedom. We've got Big Shot for D.Va. Everything else looks as you would expect. No Gorge like Roll20 were running with Stitches yesterday. Over on the other side, it's Blink Heal over Emerald Wind for Akaface's Brightwing. No cleanse either, by the way.
Yeah, going with the shield at level 7, the phase shield, phase shift?
Yeah, phase shield.
Phase shield, you know, sometimes talents are just impossible. I'm this close, man.
Hers are pretty hard, actually, because you have the shield dust, pixie dust, phase shield. All of these things that are pretty close.
Yeah. And moving into that was going to essentially help like the all-in Genji strategy, and Brightwing having the Blink Veil allows her to be able to move out. It's, you know, I don't mind it as long as you go into the Blink Heal. If you don't take Blink Heal, though, then suddenly it's like you have no defensive whatsoever for anything burst focus, and the cleanse becomes more desirable. But either way, Gale Force, they're still about that half level, 3/4. It's a little bit gray on how far ahead they are, but it's not enough to really be too proud of, again, versus the Avatar. We've got 2 more shrines. And if Gale Force is successful here, they may have broken the window early enough before the double clone stats are OP.
I was going to say this is looking pretty good for Gale Force to siege down this fort, but with a lot of the members of Team Freedom willing to rotate down, Gale Force don't want to chance it. They'll instead just back off, get the temple. Everything else has already been cleared out here, so this temple will be able to take down the fort. Team Freedom, though, they want to go in. These burrows have been perfect from Mike Udall to dodge hooks. That's, I think, the second one we've seen.
Yeah, he's just been timing that out and make sure Zugrug can't prep the team for a kill. Freedom did have an opportunity to... Because when you trade these shots here, you essentially, no team had a major objective or advantage over the other until the 13 mark hit. You knew that 50% of the shots were going to be given up one way or the other. If Gale Force had started up on bottom, I would have liked to see Freedom kind of go up and zone them back off, because giving up half the shots again is totally fine, but giving up enough to lose the structure is not. So they would have been able to secure bottom to be able to survive, and then use the mule properly to keep mid up as well. Now with these transitions being half second behind Gale Force eSports, they lose both.
Yeah, they've lost both of those forts, so their hard work from the mule bought some additional time, but they're still starting to fall behind even more. Ooh. And Gale Force being able to hold on to that. Hook hits, fans ready to come in for the battle. Curse Bullet connects, King Caffeine though staying nice and healthy.
He was, but the most important thing there is the fact that they were able to kill the mule. That cooldown doesn't adjust whenever the mule is removed from the battlefield from Gale Force. So now no free healing to that structure, and now you can rely on the cycle that the mule is going to go up there again. You can pretty much predict when it's going to happen, and Gale Force might be able to stop that top fort from healing away.
The nice thing that for Gale Force is that they've been able to keep the lanes pushing away, that when they get opportunities like that, they can quickly go and put some damage on the structure. They just didn't quite get that fort, but it's only a matter of time, especially being able to kill the mule, like you mentioned. And Gale Force, now that they've gotten a lead, they're not letting go of it very easily. They've been able to maintain about a level advantage there, keeping one of their globals in a lane to side soak at all times to make sure that they can get quickly to 16 so that if they get into a fight, it's not advantageous for Team Freedom.
Gale Force here has got to just be avoiding everything onto the map until the 16 mark. This is really the one window left for Freedom with their type of composition, to where if they are successful, it could kind of suddenly be Team Freedom's game to lose. But if they make it past the 16 mark, suddenly the game is like, well, Gale Force, you're winning in structures, you're winning enough in experience, even against an Abathur, that unless you let a major mule mistake happen at some point in the game, it's unreasonable to take a disadvantaged fight at any stage here.
We haven't often seen the Shattered Armor pick at level 13. It's been more of getting the Frozen Tempest damage, but in this sense, there's a lot of armor available for Team Freedom between Uther, who got Guardian of Ancient Kings, as well as Greymane when he's in his Worgen form. So trying to make sure that King Caffeine can reduce the armor somewhat from Team Freedom once they get into fights, but so far we really haven't had big 5v5 team fights so far. It's been a very patient game between both of these teams. Yeah,
just a lot of cycling around the map. And that's a bit, again, we've talked about the few moments where I thought Freedom would change things up in their rotations, but it's understandable why Gale Force, they got a lead, and now it's just like, we'll cycle the map. If you're never going to force our hand with a fight, okay, thank you. That's a nice deal for us. Luckily, Freedom with the Abathur has secured the experience by only a level difference now. It's slowly going to be ticking into their favor. But it's all about these shots here up on mid, as Caffeine is finally postured up to zone off.
structurally, Freedom aren't too far behind. Thanks to the Mule and how long they were able to delay, they're right about even when it comes to the forts. And they are getting close to 16 when we'll very likely, we should see them step out finally for a fight.
Yeah, sadly they didn't get to zone enough shots off on mid to secure this fort to be able to survive. So now keeps are all that remain here for Team Freedom. Not the same story for Gale Force though. Bottom still up and running. And with the full level advantage, it's just now going to be Gale Force is going to try and cycle around the next Shrine phase and not take a fight that they don't need to. And Freedom is just going to be desperately grasping for a clone initiation that they want. That is kind of something I failed to highlight early on with the composition of Freedom is between Diva Stitches, their initiation's non-existent. It's the Arthas problem kind of that I always talk about when he can't always take a fight left or right, even though he's got that hard crowd control. Somebody's got to be the flank. And with that CC being...
Hammer of Justice.
Oh, that was clutch.
Perfect.
Just one fraction of a second behind. There's that Hammer of Justice allows Dahaka to move right through. And burrow charge on out.
Gale Force doing what we know they love to do. When one of their globals gets caught, they push on the opposite side of the map. And they will get almost 2 towers for it. There we go, 2 keep towers, which is a lot of experience for them. They know that it's very likely that Team Freedom are here getting the boss, so they're making sure that they don't just completely lose out on the fact that they did lose Dahaka in the bottom lane. So they'll get those 2 towers. That opens up later on for shots to go onto the keep much faster, and made sure to take the structures down specifically so that Mule can't heal them back up.
That is definitely the one standout thing from a shot calling perspective out of Gale Force that is really displayed. Is there what I actually call it not responding to a losing situation. Every time you do that, you are losing the game. Because like when you consider the travel time to an area, not even the fact of can I actually stop whatever's happening down there, but just the travel time alone always adds up to a losing circumstance. So unless it's a game losing, just why respond in the first place? At least try and make it even. And Gale Force is the only team, it feels like, who's consistently just going, all right, okay, that's fine. It's 1 Dahaka for a front wall, and that's all you're going to be able to obtain.
Yeah, and they had a fort still down here. They had shielding from it too, so really it was making the best of a bad situation, which is how I always see it as for Gale Force too, when they do something like that.
Yeah, and it's even nicer to see them do that when a boss is at play, because we know that it seems like boss value when, where, why has been a bit of a confusion in Phase 2 for NA, and they're willing to sacrifice a 13-minute boss going, can't even get a fort on its own, Gilly.
It did have, the fort had a little bit of help from
I'm just saying,
a little help.
For how intimidating of a scary little dude he is, he throws tornadoes, he's like got double claws, he's walking around looking like he can pincer anybody in half, and then he just tickles until like 60 minutes into the game. He's just like, here's a tornado, it's a soft breeze. Then it becomes the actual hurricane.
I don't know, those tornadoes can be very frustrating.
Yeah, it is. It is a little frustrating.
As I'm sure this game is for Team Freedom right now. They've had this sort of constant we're just a little bit behind, and it's been the whole game. Well, really, around 10.
It's so strange that, I guess it's not that strange because it's obvious that it's Gale Force's pushing the envelope of Cure is paying off here, right? But I was going to say that it seems just a little interesting that Freedom values the team fight and goes to a team fight map and then volunteered into a macro-ish style of play by having the Abathur on their own and then, again, failing to have enough hard initiation to get the fights that they desire. It's not over, though, because, again, the Mule has stalled this game out long enough to where they will get a 20-on-20 fight. And now death timers are long enough that anybody who gets a 3-4-man wipe on the other side of the map can end the game, even with that keep up.
You have to remark, though, on Gale Force, their ability to force Team Freedom sort of into this situation. Freedom got a lot of the heroes that they wanted, but getting Arthas so that Illidan wouldn't be a thing, taking away Genji, taking away Li Ming, they seem to really have been able to discover and figure out what elements of a draft allow Freedom to play in the hyper-aggressive way that they would like. But they do have an opportunity for a double Greymane. It's going to be hard once they get into the fight because there's a lot of armor reduction, there's the double support too. Gale Force eSports really want to push in and try to take out this keep. Cook lands. Hammer of Justice follow-up.
They were trying to force that with their 20s, but it's not nearly as clean as they were hoping for. The Mecha Explosion, dodge thanks to the burrow from Mikey Dahl, but that was adaptation force on that. I want to say, you know, a little ambitious, but honestly, I'm going to respect the fact that Gale Force was willing to take that risk and try and force their advantage over all else there. We got a mule onto the ground. We'll see if they can rid of that. Army of the Dead is popped for King Caffeine, but Gilly, past this, the fight, Freedom can win.
Well, they know that this is just about it, and they knew that self-destruct was down. Now is the fight from Team Freedom. They are so close to having their 20. Hook lands. Michael Udall is going to burrow, but stuck with all of the putrid bile, all of the crowd control, and all of Team Freedom barreling down on top of Michael Udall. Team Freedom finally get a kill. Yeah,
no, more are going to suffer here. Calf is going to be reamed in here. I don't think he can make it out, but K1 Pro's trying to enable him. Eventually sacrificing his teammate here. The rest of the members of Gale Force have moved their way up to the shrines, trying to get these shots before Freedom responds. That was the right decision, 10 seconds too late, and then everything fell apart for Gale Force eSports. But the punishment coming out from Freedom, you saw the minute they realized they failed the all-in keep, they were like, guys, they can't win the fight afterwards. We need to force it. And finally, they got the first team fight this entire game based on that rotational misplay on Gale Force, but they need to make something with it now.
Yeah, it was excellently well done by Team Freedom, but because the temple phase immediately came up, they're focusing on the temples. At least, the very least, the top keep has sustained some damage in a way that the shots will be able to take out this keep. So this gives some catapult pressure against Gale Force eSports. But Team Freedom are not out of the woods. They did lose a keep. Their top keep is fairly low too, and they are going to have to win another fight if they want to close out this game versus Gale Force.
There's going to be the mecha explosion to secure a couple shots. The rest of the shots going down. Mid keep wailing away. Is it going to survive? It's dead.
No, it's dead. That's really good for Freedom.
Yeah, it is. They're now winning structurally. The experience is pretty close to even. The only disadvantage that Freedom has is the fact that the boss lane is the only keep standing.
Yep.
That's not the end of the world for a map like Sky Temple. It's one of the few that it's really not as relevant, but it still could be a high impact here. Again, because if Freedom wins this boss at this stage of the game, it doesn't mean the game is 100% over. But if Gale Force does, it's very, very likely.
Cool to see the new Stitch's talent Cannibalize, which helps him some self-healing when he basic attacks against heroes. This might be it. This might be the final brawl. Michael Udall is coming in, gets hit by a stun. Adaptation is being used for the self-heal.
He's got a lot of positioning, a lot of aggro on top of him, but so does King Caffeine here. Blink heal from Aquaface.
Nasmus went out before self-destruct was ready, so he has to use his pew pew pew, his big shot, trying to get back into his mech. It's almost ready. There it is. Immediate self-destruct.
They're going to try and turn the fight. The explosion is not enough, but Aquaface on the side actually went down there, and everybody's getting blown up for Gale Force eSports, just obliterated here, and now only 2 stand.
Dansky just barely lived, but his living has been the demise of Gale Force. They're going to lose another. They've lost 4 people. Only Michael Udall is left. Somehow, because of the positioning, the boss fight, the way they were able to stall out until they had self-destruct. I didn't mean boss, I meant the bridge fight, but you know what I mean. Team Freedom has won that fight.
And the rest of the members are moving on to the core here. Mike Udall is the only man to stand. We even have the slug getting the locust up. We have Ultimate Evolution. I expect that to be used there onto Dansky. And Gilly, this is the beginning of the end. Controlled, slow play throughout Sky Temple, but the fight that mattered went to Freedom, and so does Game 1.
They only needed 2 team fights to turn things around completely. 1 to get 2 temples, take out 2 keeps. Man, the patience in that fight was so impeccable. They dropped the bile. They sort of made their stand at the beginning of that bridge. Nasmus, I thought it was over when he was not able to self-destruct at the beginning of that, but patiently stepped back, kited back, got his mech, and immediately dropped it for the self-destruct, and that is when things took a turn for the worse for Gale Force, where Freedom were able to win the fight to win the game.
Yeah, that game was... I'm actually really torn on it because I feel like I saw all the things I've been asking from North America for so long in Gale Force they were just like, what is the strengths of my opponents? In the draft, they target the player that they think is going to stand out. Then play style, they remove the thing that they expect to be the biggest strength according to the opponent. They didn't play insanely different, but they played just enough to make the common things, that composition that Freedom has, to not be, oh my goodness, insanely strong. And that is what I've been waiting for. But then when it came to the moment of execution, they messed up one time, and that was enough to give a window to Freedom, and they completely just capitalize on top of it. I'm so satisfied, but I'm also so heartbroken at the same time, right?
Yeah.
To see a team like that close to decision-making wise, min-maxing things almost optimally, and then also at the same side, it's like Freedom never let go, right? Mentally, they deserve that game just as much as Gale Force. So I'm just like, heart's broken in two different directions right now.
Dread's dealing with a lot of emotions up here at the desk. You could feel it. You can feel it. But, you know, what is most important at the end of the day is that not only are we having a great time here, but Zugrug maintains his 100% win rate on Stitches. Hey.
We're going to take a look at how he actually manages to make that happen.
Nice.
We've got a replay of the last team fight that you enjoyed so very much.
Loved
Here it is. Gilly, go ahead and give me a breakdown. What are you looking at the most? What really stood out?
Well, the future ball placement was really good, but it's all about how close Nasmus was to being able to get. He was trying really hard to be able to get his self-destruct in time. Fan in the back line too, dodging, going all over the place, dodging the hook too. But see, Nasmus goes down just as self-destruct's ready, and their kiting is so good all together to pull back all of the members away from Fan, the Dragon Blade, all of that. Dansky got super low, but then the minute that Nasmus gets his mech back, drops the self-destruct, which immediately turns the tides of the fight. You can feel it. Gale Force is like, uh-oh, and they move back again. Good stuff. Such good stuff.
Yeah, a lot of greed there at the very end for Gale Force eSports, but perfect response on the side of Freedom. Because like a lot of that damage, the reason why I call that greed, the fight start was not greed. It's once it hit the bridge, right?
Yes.
Because that same decision that we talked about with Gale Force eSports, that they are one of the better teams at not responding to a losing situation, that's essentially what they were doing at the end there. Whenever you start a gank or a fight and it's not successful in the first 3 seconds, it's almost never worth continuing it. Even if you get the kill, unless it's very end of the game, it's not worth your time because the death timers and the experience gained is not worth, again, that response that the opponent is going to have on a different angle of the map. Gale Force started the fight. It didn't work out in the first couple of seconds, but they had already committed to it, so they felt like they had to force that. They essentially took it and said, this is the game-winning fight, and then when it wasn't, they said, this is the game-winning fight. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like in an unhealthy way, because Zugrug got 3 full slams on 5 people through that bridge, like all the way through, and they were still like, no, we really want to force this. Don't get me wrong, the big shot into the turn, beautiful from the Freedom, but Gale Force, you could see that they were trying to push more, and again, just going too far.
Yeah, that's why we caution so much against fighting on a bridge like that.
Yeah.
And the positioning of the two teams made so much matter in that game. The fact that Freedom were able to kite back, there wasn't a flanking Arthas from the side that didn't allow that to happen, so that then Genji can go in and make sure that every strike of Dragon Blade is hitting. Fan plays a phenomenal Genji, but it was all the fact that Freedom didn't have any pressure behind them at all, that they were able to kite back, and they have with the slam build of Stitches, they have the advantage in those kinds of fights over that kite back.
And another thing to give an example, on the same note, why you don't fight on those bridge, we didn't even talk about it. I'm not trying to say that this is even a misplay because I don't know if the cooldown was even up, but let's imagine a world where thrusters is up. I mean, he big shots into making sure he can get the mech. If he throws a thruster and then throws out that mecha, that fight goes from like they're chasing them down, eventually buddy ever dies, that's a 5-man wipe immediately on that bridge. Like, that is why territorial advantages, and why when I say territorial spells, it's referring to things very successful in those tight corridors, and like that, APOCs are the best territorial spells, one of the best in the entire game, and why bridges, why the top of Dragonshire, things are not siegeable, is because the range is so very close.
Yeah, it did feel like his immediate dropping of it was more like, I need to protect my team at this point. We're out of a lot of options. We just need to get Gale Force away so that Dansky can stay alive. But Team Freedom walks away with game number 1. Let's see where game number 2 is going to take place. Freedom's choice likely, because Gale Force will pick first pick.